And then share screen.
No. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Now you're good. And then share screen.
All set to go?
Oh, you're all good?
Okay, good morning, folks. My name is Elspeth Slater. I'm an associate professor at the School of Social Work and also the chair of the university's Institutional Review Board. I'm here today to give you an IRB 101, specifically targeted to faculty who are sponsoring student research here at Salem State. And my slides will not go forward. There we go. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about. First, I'll talk about who needs to go through IRB review, what kind of projects. Then we'll talk about the faculty role in sponsoring student research as principal investigators. We'll walk through the application process, and that will include an overview of the application questions that students have to fill out, and then we can discuss anything that you wish to discuss. Okay, so let's start with requirements for IRB review. So the following is the policy from the IRB at Salem State. If your research or your student's research meets any of the following criteria, we do need to review it. First, we're looking at proposals that are designed to generate generalizable knowledge. We're looking at proposals that put any human participant at a risk greater than the minimal risk they would experience in everyday life. We'll need to review any research that involves special populations. That includes minors, such as students in schools, people under 18 years of age. And we need to review anything that will be disseminated. And by disseminated, we're referring to anything that goes out in written form, that is published, that is in a presentation to an internal or external audience. And this actually includes in-class presentations. So we have a pretty wide net here at Salem State. So a lot of people say, when can my research begin? I've submitted to IRB, but when can it begin? And the fact is that no research, including data collection, can go on until you've successfully been reviewed by the IRB. And you will know that you've been successfully reviewed by the IRB when you receive an email from us with that indication. So let's talk a little bit about the faculty role in student research. It's important to remember that faculty members are responsible for their students' research. In essence, they're liable for their students' research because, in fact, they are the principal investigator of record. Now, what happens is that you work with your students to prepare a proposal, and then the students access the IRB application in Navigator. Here are the steps that they actually need to do, by the way. They select the Learning and Development tab, click on IRB application, and start a new application. What happens is that from there, faculty members will receive an email that directs them to go into their Polaris account to review the proposal. At that point, the faculty member should read the proposal, make sure that it's responsive to all the questions posed, make sure that it has all of the information that's required, and then approve it to send it on to the IRB. So the IRB does not get the proposal until the faculty member sends it on to us. Now, we do have a 2-week turnaround, so we will be getting back to students and faculty within 2 weeks for sure. But that may mean that there are revisions, so it may take a little bit longer, but the first response is within 2 weeks. When we do return proposals to students with revisions, we're very specific about the reasons why and what people need to address. So you will always have some guidance to work with when liaising with your student. I find as a professor of research methods that one thing that can greatly facilitate ease with this step is to have the IRB proposal as a graded element of the course. If you have an assignment dedicated just to the IRB proposal, I find that students take it more seriously and things happen in a more timely manner. So what you need to know around the revisions process is that 65% of the IRB proposals that we receive each year are returned for revisions. So this means that things are falling through the cracks, and one of the reasons we have faculty members as sponsors of the research, as principal investigators, is that we expect them to take ownership and responsibility for what their students are doing and to review and see that the proposals are correctly filled out and are adequately responding to questions. So once again, revisions are emailed to students' Salem State account. We cannot use non-Salem State accounts, and detailed responses are always provided. And we ask that faculty work with students on their revision before they resubmit the IRB proposal in Navigator and before the faculty re-reviews the IRB proposal in Polaris before sending it on to the IRB for second review. So let me go over a couple of pointers that may be helpful to you as you support your students in working on IRB proposals. First of all, we have a brand new, incredible Canvas website with many, many resources I'm going to show you in just 1 minute. These are extremely helpful to faculty, to students, and really the key to success for putting these proposals together is to make sure that the proposals are responsive to the questions posed. It sounds basic, but it's the main problem that we have with these assignments. That's why it's so important for you to read the proposal before sending it on. And in order to be as painstakingly specific as possible in answering the questions that we pose, you can go to our website and get some help. Let me show you. So I'm going to click on this link. Let's see, and the link is not going. Okay, here we are. So this is the IRB website. As you'll note, it's salemstate.edu/IRB. But the key thing to focus on is this link right here. Please visit our Canvas site. So let's go and take a look at that. This Canvas site is only accessible through our front-facing website, so that's how you'll be able to get here. But as you can see, we have a page for student researchers, a page for faculty advisors, for faculty researchers, and the IRB committee itself, which you won't have access to. So let's take a look at faculty advisors of student researchers. Okay, so on this site, we have a number of links, and we have information about who needs review, how to apply online, but here's what will really help your students, this area here, application help. We have step-by-step instructions for the different parts of the IRB application, and we have, for example, sample forms that students can use to craft their letters of agreement from external organizations, etc. We'll talk more about that. So be sure to take a look at this website, and this is something you can also point your students to as well if they have confusion about anonymity and confidentiality, or they're struggling to understand what risks their research might pose to human subjects. So please use our Canvas website. And as you're supporting students in being as specific as possible in their responses, please remind them that the IRB proposal doesn't need to be long, it just needs to be responsive. We've seen IRB proposals that are just a couple pages long, but they're very specific and responsive to the questions posed, and they fly right on through. So let's go over the questions that are involved in the IRB proposal. The first one asks students to summarize the goals, purpose, and methodology of the research and the hypothesis to be tested. By goals and purpose, we're referring to a problem statement, which can be a paragraph, statement of the guiding research question or study aims. Methods, very basic, what is the research approach, maybe qualitative, quantitative, what is the research design, is it cross-sectional, is it longitudinal, and then what are the hypotheses, or what is the hypothesis. So pretty straightforward, doesn't need to be long, just needs to be responsive. Then you're going to ask students to state the procedures for participants, and what I mean by that is specifically detailing what human subjects will be asked to do as part of the study. I tell my students that they need to act as if they're talking to a Martian, walking the reader through their procedures as if they had no idea of how this all worked. Are you going to meet them in a quiet library room? Are you going to survey them in the cafeteria? Will you be including an incentive like a cookie or a gift card or coffee? Just detail all of the specific procedures that the person will go through, whether it's a survey, whether it's an observation, whether it's an interview protocol. Next, we're going to need information about the research participants and specifically how they're chosen for inclusion in the study, which means that we need to know about the sampling plan for the study. And most specifically, we need to understand what the selection criteria are and what the exclusion criteria are. So students need to respond to that very specifically. And they also need to include information about how they will recruit people into the study. We have very specific guidelines on recruitment language. I'm just going to take you to our Canvas website section on that. You can see here there is information about what needs to go on posters, flyers, or emails, or for example Facebook posts where people are being recruited. We need approval dates, a clear title, description of the project, how long it will take, things like that. So this information is right here. Students can use this to craft their proposal. At this point, we're going to ask for information on how confidentiality and/or anonymity of the research participants and their data will be ensured. It's important to remember that confidentiality and anonymity are not the same thing. And in fact, you can read more about that at this link. And this is a great link to send your students to. This is again on our Canvas site. So when a study is anonymous, it means that no personally identifiable information will be collected. A confidential study means that kind of information will be collected, but it will be kept confidential. And for examples of personally identifiable information, you have this list here. So that's information for your students. Be sure that they distinguish between confidentiality and anonymity. And also, let's not forget the data that are part of this process, the tapes of interview transcripts, the downloads of SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics data, so on and so forth. How will you protect those data? Often we ask that people use a password-protected computer to keep data sets downloaded from Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, usually also a password-protected file. If we're talking about hard data in the form of surveys, we would ask people to keep information in a locked cabinet, and so on and so forth. Also important in the proposal will be a clear statement of the nature and amount of risk or potential risk that's involved in participation, and also a statement on how risk will be minimized. So let me break that down. Every study has some risk, even if it is very minimal. So for example, if students are conducting a project about attitudes towards Muslim people in the United States, people participating in a study of that nature might have some discomfort sharing their feelings if they weren't particularly familiar with that population. So that risk should be stated. And then once a risk is stated, there needs to be an indication of how the researchers will attempt to minimize the risk. A very common example, other than the one I've given, is if students are being asked about maybe their mental state, their mental health condition, their feelings of depression, maybe their feelings of stress around midterm grades. If there's risk of students feeling stressed out at their response to the questions posed by the researchers, an attempt to minimize it might be information about a referral to the counseling center or the number to a hotline, for example. So we need to acknowledge the risk, and we need to say how we will attempt to minimize the risk. After talking about risk, we also need to get into the potential benefit to the research participant and the potential benefit to society of the proposed research. and we need to address how this outweighs the risks that we talked about. So let's break that down a little bit. So first, you need to discuss the benefit in two ways. You need to talk about how the research will benefit society, and specifically how the research participant will benefit, and that can't be in the form of incentive such as coffee, a cookie, or a gift card. Then you need to go into how the benefits outweigh the risks. It can be short statements, it doesn't need to be long, but it needs to be responsive. And let's see what our Canvas site has to say on this topic. So just a little bit more guidance here on risks and benefits, and we also have a more in-depth PowerPoint which is narrated. Let's take a look at that. Our committee put this together last year to help students prepare this section because it's an area that's often challenging, and this isn't opening up. Let's see. Okay, I think I will go back for now. It's there. I think that the technology is not allowing me to do this right now. Okay. Next, the student will need to describe how consent will be obtained from human participants or how disclosure will be given. So first of all, informed consent and disclosure aren't the same thing. Oh dear. Okay, this is the risks and benefits PowerPoint presentation that I was looking at before. We'll just give that a quick look. As you can see, there are narrations in here, so this is essentially a lecture. You could pull this up and run it like this. Okay, so you get a sense of that. This is a lecture that you could provide to your students in class or as homework in a flipped classroom style situation. Let's see if I can get back to my screen. So back to informed consent and disclosure, which are not the same thing. Disclosure is used when either signatures can't be gathered or do not need to be gathered. Often we see disclosures at the top of an online survey, whereas informed consent is a process that we go through with people as we are talking to them in interviews or as we are handing them a survey to be filled out. And we want to not only see the consent form or disclosure form, we also want you to walk us through how consent or disclosure, well specifically consent, will actually be obtained. And this is really another situation where you need to explain it to an alien, walk the IRB reader through it very carefully so we can understand what's going to happen to the person and where and what are they going to see. Let's take a look at the Canvas resources on this topic. Here we have a disclosure statement, an informed consent, an assent for children who are participating in research, and a parental consent form. These can be downloaded. Students can work with them directly and tweak them to make them fit their study. We'll see if this opens. Sometimes students make the mistake of not specifically, oh dear, okay, sometimes students make the mistake of not specifically changing the information that is in italics. The idea is that students can fill in their name here, fill in their study name here, fill in their faculty name here, fill in the goals of the study here, so on and so forth. Oh dear. Okay, so that's just an example of informed consent. Finally, if you're partnering with an agency, a school, an organization, any kind of secondary organization to recruit study participants, you need to include a letter of agreement. And we have some very specific things that need to be on that letter of agreement, which first and foremost has to be signed in ink and needs to be on the letterhead of the organization or agency. A scanned copy of the letter is just fine, but it needs to have these two requirements. And very specifically, the letter has to state the names of all the researchers on the team. It needs to indicate the specific nature of the research, whether it's a survey, observation, or an interview, and indicate any guidelines that the agency or organization is stipulating for the researcher to engage in order to do the research. In other words, there needs to be explicit, detailed statements of agreement with the research design. Students write the letter for the agency, give it to the agency usually tweaks it a little bit. The letter is addressed to the IRB at Salem State. And then we really need to see all of your final data collection instruments. And by data collection instruments, I'm referring to surveys, observational protocols, interview protocols, and the like. We want students to submit their final data collection instrument so that we know exactly what's going out to human participants, what the questions are. If there's a change before the research study begins, there's always the option to submit what's known as a modification request to change the instrument. Let's just take a look at the modification request. These are just the guidelines for what to go through, and there's a particular form that can be filled out and sent to the IRB. So I'm wondering if you have any questions about the IRB process. When it comes to your students having questions, you can feel free to contact me or Ms. Megan Williams, who is our Director of Research Administration. She's available through email or via the telephone. We are happy to answer any questions about human subjects, research ethics, and the like, but we ask that faculty focus on helping their students with methodological issues. That's beyond what we are empowered to provide support for. So at this point, I'll take any questions that people have.
So Elspeth, I'm wondering, what is the most common mistake that students are making in their IRB proposals?
That's a great question. So I would say it's split between a couple of different things. First and foremost, getting anonymity and confidentiality straight is something that's hard for students. Also, not including any statement of minimal risk or forgetting to talk about how they will minimize risk. That is also an issue. But other than that, I would say that the main problem we have is that people don't include enough details. When I say explain it to a Martian, I really mean it. Walk us through in painstakingly detail specifics. It's very important that we understand exactly what the human subject will be exposed to at all points. So as detailed as possible on those really boring questions, that is a huge help. And I think there's, of those 65% that we turn around, that's almost always an issue that we see.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for a good question.
Thank you, Elspeth. This has really been helpful, and it was great to have you come to the class and Skype with the students, because I've been seeing their drafts have been coming to me, and it's been giving me a better lens to look at their proposals through. So
wonderful. Can you say more about that? Because I'm trying to reach more faculty to help them do exactly that.
So what they've done is they are sending me in a Word document their proposal, because it's too tricky to do for them to go through the whole process of doing it in Navigator and then that back and forth. So before it even goes to Navigator, they're just writing it out in a document. We're using Google Docs, so I can write right on there what's missing or where they need clarity. And one of the things I've been telling them is you're going to feel like when you're writing you're repeating yourself, but that's
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Because you can't assume, it's like you say, talk to a Martian. I keep telling them they can't assume that you know what all these acronyms mean or all these educational programs. So they need to be clear, specific, spell it out. I think the biggest learning curve for me has been the difference between confidentiality and anonymity. So thank you for that piece.
Well,
but so far, I have 9 students this year, and 3 of them have gone in. I think 1 has been approved. We're still waiting on 2, but I feel good that they're taking their time this year, and I think it's because of your input and support. So thank you for that. Because I told them the goal is to get these approved, but to have them done well, not to just rush them through.
yes.
And part of the process is the back and forth. So I think they're at a better place understanding that component of this.
Thank you so much for that feedback. So many students get upset when they get a revision and they feel that the IRB has denied me or rejected me, and I think some of the language on the automated form may make it feel like that, but it is meant to be a process, and we do always support students as best we can with detailed information about what it is they need to do. And we really see ourselves as a teaching IRB in this way to help people through. So that's our goal, and we're trying to do the best we can. But I think the fact that you've decided to have them give the proposal to you in Word document format ahead of time is a huge, smart move. I started to do that 10 years ago when I began teaching research methods and ended up making it into a graded assignment because students took it more seriously and were more careful about it as a result. So I can't push that strongly enough. I think that's a great option. But please let me know how else I can help as the semester goes forward.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Judy. Okay, thank you. Shall I press screen? Oh, stop recording. Okay.